They drew their guns at my 16-year-old son. All he did was kneel beside his brother's grave, holding a bouquet of wildflowers and an old military dog tag. One minute he was whispering a quiet goodbye. The next, 6 cops came crashing in like it was some kind of drug bust. Why? Because my neighbor, Joanne, called 911 and claimed there was a suspicious young man with a weapon and a shovel doing some kind of cult activity in the backyard. She had no idea that what she was interrupting was the burial of a soldier, my firstborn son. And she definitely didn't know that the woman stepping out from the porch, eyes red, heart shattered, but walking with calm, wasn't just some grieving mom. I'm the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. Yeah, she messed with the wrong family. But let me back up. 2 weeks earlier, we lost David, my oldest, a combat medic who died overseas. His final request? To be buried under the maple tree in our backyard. The same tree he and his younger brother used to climb when they were little. It wasn't flashy. No media, no motorcade, just family, a local chaplain, a folded flag, and a song David used to hum on the way to school. We did everything quietly, reverently, respecting both his wishes and the law. And yes, before you ask, the land is ours. Private property. It's been in my family for generations, long before Joanne and her HOA took over the neighborhood with their cookie-cutter lawns and petty rules. And yes, we're legally registered with the state as a private burial site. But that didn't stop Joanne. To her, our grief wasn't sacred. It was unsightly. A disruption to her community standards. So when Luke stepped forward that morning, wearing his brother's old jacket, sleeves too long and heart too full, and knelt beside the casket with shaking hands, Joanne screamed. Right from her porch, arms crossed like some parking enforcer of the afterlife. What is going on here? This isn't a cemetery. This is HOA land, I tried to explain. Again, that we weren't violating anything. That this was our land, our family, our son. But she didn't listen. Joanne never listened. 15 minutes later, we heard sirens. Bright flashing lights lit up our driveway like it was a crime scene. Then came the shouting. Get on the ground! Hands where I can see them! Luke froze. His face, I'll never forget that look. Sheer panic. And in that moment, I wasn't a federal official. I was just a mother watching her last living child being treated like a threat. For mourning. I stepped forward, heart racing, and pulled out my badge. Valerie Shaw, I said. U.S. Department of Justice, lower your weapons. You should have seen the look on their faces. And as for Joanne, she stood there smirking, filming on her phone like she'd just caught someone putting up a Halloween decoration without approval. She thought she had control. She thought calling the cops would scare us into silence. She had no clue what was coming next. Want to hear what happened after that? Buckle up. It gets wild. Let's just say Joanne didn't take the hint. You'd think after almost getting a kid arrested at his own brother's funeral and realizing she'd just barked up the very federal tree, she'd back off, right? Nope, not Joanne. The very next morning, while Luke and I were still trying to process what had happened, while my son was sitting quietly at the kitchen table, hands still shaking from the night before, I stepped out onto the porch and saw them. 2 brand new surveillance cameras, mounted high on Joanne's fence, both aimed directly at our backyard. I stared at them for a long second, my coffee cooling in my hands. She didn't even try to hide it. One was disguised as a birdhouse. The other, tucked into a decorative lantern, blinking like it was daring me to say something. That same afternoon, we received an official-looking letter in the mail. From Joanne, of course. Signed, President Greenfield Oaks HOA. The letter was full of legalese that didn't hold up for 5 seconds. She claimed we had violated community tranquility statutes, disrupted neighborhood harmony, and were subject to disciplinary action if we held any more unauthorized ceremonies. Unauthorized. That's what she called it. Burying my child. I didn't even get angry. Not yet. I just felt tired. Because grief is a weight. Some days it crushes you, some days it floats just above your chest like it's waiting to settle again. But injustice? Injustice lights a fire. And Joanne was playing with matches. I took out my phone and started documenting. Photos of the cameras, screenshots of her emails, a copy of the cease and desist letter. Then I started digging into her HOA. See, I'd been ignoring the HOA for years. We were technically exempt. Our property was recorded in the county long before Greenfield Oaks even existed. But Joanne had always acted like we were squatters on her turf. She used to fine people for excessive bird noise and non-regulation patio chairs. A couple down the block once got cited because their dog's tail wagged too energetically during quiet hours. I wish I were kidding, but this, targeting my son, filming us on our own land? That was a new level of deranged. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I had a better idea. I called in a favor. A quiet one. Jerome, one of the most meticulous investigators I've ever worked with. A man who drinks stale coffee like it's gourmet and talks to spreadsheets like they're people, started digging into Greenfield Oaks. Finances, contracts, charter, bylaws. It didn't take long before he started texting me things like, "Did you know the HOA pays a landscaping company that doesn't exist? Why is she sending HOA funds to a PayPal account called Community Enrichment? Who approved a $2,000 invoice for patriotic mailbox upgrades?" Spoiler, no one. Meanwhile, Joanne was on a full PR rampage. She posted to the neighborhood forum claiming I had faked my position at the DOJ to intimidate hardworking HOA board members. She said Luke had terrorized the block with military theatrics and attached blurry, zoomed-in photos of him holding the folded flag, captioned, "Unknown youth, possibly armed, camo jacket, military gear. BE alert." One neighbor replied, "Isn't that the Attorney General's son?" Joanne answered, "Unconfirmed. Could be crisis actors." I had to read it 3 times just to believe it. She was spiraling, and fast. Then came the flyers. Joanne went door to door, wearing a safety vest and handing out printed announcements for an emergency community meeting. The bold red headline read, "Our neighborhood is under siege, protect our values." Luke and I showed up. Of course we did. Every head in the room turned as we walked in. Joanne stood at the front with her usual smug smile, holding a microphone like she was running for mayor. "Friends," she said, "we are facing a serious issue of unapproved use of property. Last week, an unsanctioned funeral was held involving flags, weapons, and minors in distress." Someone behind us whispered, "Is she serious right now?" I raised my hand. "Our land is not under HOA jurisdiction. That's on file with the county." Joanne didn't flinch. "Anyone can file something. Doesn't make it legal." That's when Luke stepped forward. Calm, steady. He opened a folder. "This is the state exemption for family cemeteries on private land," he read. "Signed and notarized. And this is the deed showing the HOA was formed 20 years after our land was recorded. And this," he held up another page, "is a federal ruling stating that military-affiliated burial sites are protected under national law." You could hear a pin drop. Then someone in the back whispered, "Holy crap." Joanne turned red. Then she tried to pivot. "This isn't about one family," she snapped. "It's about the emotional impact on others, the noise, the flag being lowered without approval, the trauma of seeing a coffin on a weekday." "You want us to schedule our grief?" I asked. She stammered, then blurted out, "Let's vote." Only 2 hands went up, hers and one guy who looked like he got promised a fruit basket. That's when the tide shifted. Someone else said, "Wait, we didn't know we could ignore her before." The whole room broke into uneasy laughter. Joanne didn't laugh. She clutched the mic like it might save her. She had no idea the real reckoning hadn't even started yet. By that point, Joanne had poked the bear. And the bear had credentials. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was activated. The emergency meeting may have made her look ridiculous in front of the whole neighborhood, but what she didn't realize was that the cameras, the fines, the lies, all of it, had opened the door to something much bigger. Because while she was out there playing dictator with her clipboard and conspiracy flyers, Jerome had gone full bloodhound. A few days after the meeting, he called. "You're gonna want to sit down," he said. I was already sitting, but the moment I opened the email he sent, I felt like I needed to lie down. The HOA's finances were a dumpster fire wrapped in fraud. We're talking five-figure catering expenses from high-end restaurants for board lunches, payments to a landscaping company that hadn't done a single job, and then, of course, the random wire transfers to the Community Enrichment PayPal account, which Jerome traced directly to, wait for it, Joanne's personal email. But that wasn't even the worst of it. There was a contract buried deep in the HOA's records, a private surveillance contract paid with HOA funds for cameras all over the neighborhood. The footage didn't go to local law enforcement or any neutral third party. It went straight to Joanne's laptop. She wasn't just monitoring for safety. She was watching people like some kind of suburban Big Brother, tracking routines, recording conversations on porches, zooming in on kids playing in their own yards. She wasn't enforcing order. She was feeding an obsession. Jerome flagged multiple federal violations: unauthorized data collection, child privacy breaches, financial fraud, misappropriation of community funds. In short, she'd gone from annoying to criminal. And the moment I saw the extent of it, something in me clicked. She tried to shame my son. She tried to weaponize her little rulebook against our grief. She thought she could control this neighborhood with intimidation and fake authority. But now? Now I had the leverage. And I wasn't going to waste it. I didn't go public yet. I wanted her to stew, to feel the walls start closing in. Over the next week, Joanne kept her distance. No more marches down the street in her HOA windbreaker. No more megaphone rants about community purity. She even stopped posting on the neighborhood forum. A first. But it wasn't because she felt remorse. She was panicking. You could see it in the way she started ducking into her house when people walked by. In the sunglasses that suddenly became part of her daily outfit. Word was getting around. Neighbors were talking. Quietly at first, behind hedges, over fences, in whispered grocery store checkouts. They started comparing notes, comparing fines. One woman told me Joanne fined her $100 for unauthorized shade because her patio umbrella cast a shadow on the neighbor's lawn. Another got cited for wind chimes that disrupted the avian ecosystem. People were waking up. Meanwhile, Luke was starting to heal, slowly. He spent his afternoons in the backyard, tending to David's resting place. He built a small bench under the maple tree, planted flowers, sat there sometimes for hours, not saying much. His hands weren't trembling anymore. And every time I looked out the window and saw him out there, not broken, not defeated, just present, I knew I was doing the right thing. Then, as if she couldn't stand the silence any longer, Joanne snapped. She started posting again, wild, rambling accusations about government infiltration, property line tampering, even claiming the flag we'd put at David's grave was emitting low-frequency noise that disturbed wildlife. That's right. She tried to file an HOA citation against a fallen soldier. That was the moment I realized. She wasn't just out of control, she was dangerous. And it was time to make the next move. Jerome had already secured the green light for a federal warrant, a quiet, well-planned operation to extract the surveillance equipment, the laptops, the hard drives, all of it. But I had a better idea. I didn't want to just take her down behind closed doors. I wanted the community, the very people she'd ruled through fear and fines and fake laws, to see exactly who she was, to know the truth, to see it with their own eyes. Because once they did, there'd be no going back. I started planning the most important HOA meeting Greenfield Oaks had ever seen. And this time, I was holding the mic. I made sure everyone knew about the meeting. Not the kind of meeting where Joanne passed out crumpled flyers and guilt-tripped people into attending. I mean everyone. Every mailbox in the neighborhood got a printed invite. I hand-delivered some myself. Jerome made sure we had full legal clearance to present what we'd found. I even called in a local community journalist to sit in quietly at the back. No drama, no flash, just facts and a whole lot of receipts. By the time the evening came, the Greenfield Oaks Community Center was packed. People were standing along the walls, whispering nervously, casting sideways glances at the front of the room, where Joanne stood, once again, in her signature beige suit and pearls, gripping the microphone like it was a sword. "Before we begin," she said, voice shaky but still trying to sound authoritative, "I'd like to remind everyone that this is a private community meeting and any government overreach is a violation of our charter." She was trying to take back control. You could feel it. She thought this was still her turf. I stood up and walked to the front, calm, focused. No badge, no titles. Just a mother, a neighbor, and someone with the truth. "Joanne," I said gently, "I think your neighbors deserve to see what's been going on. In their name." She tried to cut me off. "This is not on the agenda." I turned to the projector Jerome had quietly set up behind me. "Then let's make it part of the agenda." The screen lit up. First slide, a spreadsheet showing HOA funds, thousands of dollars in unexplained wellness expenses, catering from steakhouse chains, and transfers to a PayPal account under the name J. Greenfield, 2020. Gasps echoed across the room. Someone in the second row muttered, "That's where our dues went?" Next slide, a screenshot of video footage. A family eating dinner, inside their kitchen. The angle was unmistakable. It had been taken through a hidden camera. Several people gasped. One woman actually covered her mouth. Then another slide. A list of HOA citations sent out while residents were out of town, matched with surveillance timestamps showing Joanne herself pulling trash bins into the street, snapping photos, then finding the homeowners. You could feel it shift, the whole room. People weren't just shocked anymore. They were angry. Joanne went pale. "This is doctored. It's all fake. That PayPal account isn't mine." Jerome stood up, calm as ever. "We traced it to your email. We have the server logs." She was losing them. One by one, people began standing. "I got fined $200 for unauthorized shrubbery. I just planted roses," a man said. "She made my daughter cry because our mailbox was too colorful," another woman added. "She fined me for laughing too loudly after 9 p.m. The room erupted into story after story, all of them different, but with one thing in common. Joanne's iron grip on the neighborhood. It wasn't just about power, it was about control. And for years, they'd let her get away with it. Not anymore. Then Luke stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He held up the flag, the same folded one he'd carried to David's grave. "She said this was threatening," he said quietly. "She called the cops on me, while I was burying my brother." The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the projector. Someone sniffled in the back. Luke didn't cry. He just stood there, and tall, steady, holding the flag to his chest. "I loved my brother," he said, "and she tried to make that look like a crime." Joanne tried to object. She took a step forward, raising her hand like she had something profound to say. But no one was listening anymore. They'd seen enough. Jerome gave me a nod from the side of the room. The agents entered quietly. No guns, no shouting, just black slacks, tucked-in polos, and leather folders full of warrants. They walked straight to Joanne's chair, presented the paperwork, and began collecting her laptop, her backup drive, her HOA-issued tablet. Joanne didn't scream, didn't cry. She just stood there, clutching her coffee mug that read, "Queen of Order," her knuckles white. I watched her eyes flicker between the neighbors, the same ones who used to avoid eye contact, who used to nod nervously and say, "Yes, ma'am," just to avoid a citation. Now they were looking right at her, some with anger, some with pity, but all of them with clarity. The veil was gone. As the agents packed up the evidence, someone in the crowd whispered, "Is this really happening?" And I turned to him and said, "Finally." That night, Joanne wasn't arrested. Yet. But the charges were coming. Wire fraud, illegal surveillance, elder abuse. She knew it too. You could see it in the way she clutched that mug like it was a lifeline. But she still had one last move in her. Because 2 days later, she sued me. That's right. Joanne Greenfield, the woman who tried to fine a grieving teenager for flag etiquette, filed a civil lawsuit against me, claiming emotional damage, reputational harm, and wrongful interference in sovereign community affairs. Luke opened the envelope and laughed. She says you ruined her life. I looked out the window toward the maple tree, the flowers around David's grave swaying in the wind. She picked the wrong life to mess with, I said. And if Joanne wanted a courtroom battle? She was about to get one. Joanne really thought she had one more trick up her sleeve. She strutted into federal court like she was walking into a PTA meeting, wearing a wrinkled beige skirt suit with shoulder pads and clutching a manila folder like it held state secrets. Her attorney? A man named Curtis, who proudly introduced himself as a sovereign legal strategist. He wore a bolo tie, carried a stack of spiral-bound pamphlets, and at one point referred to the U.S. government as the corporate entity formerly known as America. It was a lot. Joanne's lawsuit was even more absurd than I expected. She accused me of psychological warfare, claimed Luke was a militant minor, said her role as HOA president was equivalent in scope to a federal appointment. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman who'd clearly seen it all, read through the documents in silence, then looked up over her glasses and asked, deadpan, Ms. Greenfield, is this a prank? Joanne stood up, arms shaking with righteous fury. Your Honor, I am the elected president of a sovereign neighborhood body. This woman brought federal interference into our spiritual core. The judge raised a brow. You called the police on a child, at a funeral. Joanne snapped. He was holding a metal pole. That was a folded flag, the judge replied, dead serious. Sit down. What followed was, honestly, kind of tragic. Joanne kept interrupting, objecting to everything. She tried to submit conspiracy blog printouts as evidence. She accused me of infiltrating her HOA with agents disguised as neighbors. Then Luke took the stand. Wearing his brother's blazer, still a little too big for him, he told the room, simply and clearly, what it felt like to have the police called on him while saying goodbye to his hero. I wasn't hurting anyone, he said. I was just trying to honor my brother. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even the bailiff looked like he was holding it together with duct tape. The judge didn't need a recess. She dismissed Joanne's lawsuit on the spot, called it frivolous and malicious, imposed financial sanctions on her, and referred the entire HOA case for further federal prosecution. And just like that, her empire crumbled. Within 24 hours, the DOJ filed official charges: wire fraud, unlawful surveillance, harassment, elder exploitation. HOA board members resigned en masse. Her mugshot hit the news by sunset. Joanne Greenfield, once the self-declared Queen of Greenfield Oaks, became a national headline. Neighborhood watchdog or suburban tyrant. The HOA was dissolved. The office seized. The rules she clung to so tightly, gone. The neighborhood, it breathed again. People ripped down her violation notices. Someone hosted a block party with charcoal grills, the same kind she once fined for unauthorized smoke. Kids stayed out past 9 p.m. Dogs barked freely. And me? I bought the old HOA office at auction and turned it into something better. David's Garden, a peaceful memorial space open to the community. Luke planted petunias, Joanne hated petunias, and built a bench under the maple tree. At the dedication, people brought flowers. Some brought their old HOA citations and shredded them into compost for the garden. One kid chalked on the sidewalk, "No more Joannes." And we smiled. Because in the end, she didn't win. She thought she owned the neighborhood, but we were never hers to control. Now we laugh louder. We plant what we want. We remember the ones we've lost in peace. If this story hit you in the heart, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next story. Because there's always another HOA, and sometimes another Joanne. But there's also people like you, and like Luke, and that gives me hope. Thanks for listening.